Good afternoon YouTube and welcome back to the channel and Project E46 M3, where it's not all been great the past couple of weeks as the SMG gear position sensor unfortunately failed. But in today's video I'm going to show you how to replace it and reset the fault. So if you're watching this video, you've probably got the codes I'm going to list below and it's pointing to you towards the gear position sensor. Now unfortunately the SMG does have a few issues. Obviously the pump can fail with pressure, the relay can fail as well, which can overwork the pump, the gear position sensor and the detent springs. But today we're just going to discuss the gear position sensor replacement. So I'll run you through what happened. I was driving the car just a couple of miles from the house. Everything seemed normal when I set off, and then I headed over what's called Staines Bridge near me, it's a tight bridge which links both sides of Staines together over the Thames, and that is the last place you want to break down. And as luck would have it, went to hit third gear as I was cruising over the bridge, getting everything up to temperature, and then I was greeted with the yellow car going to hit where it went back to second, and I was like, well, that's weird. Hit third again. Then it just locked in third. Car went into like a limp mode. It wouldn't let me accelerate. I thought something ain't right here, but I'm still moving. And then I went to push the accelerator again. Nothing. It was like, it just wouldn't rev, wouldn't do anything. And I was just coasting over the Staines Bridge. Thankfully, it wasn't the busiest time of day because me and my friend were off to a motor museum. And I just crawled over the other side into a lay-by where turning the ignition on and off like 6 or 7 times, it eventually cleared. It let me drive again, but later that day it came back and all the signs pointed towards the gear position sensor. Now unfortunately it is on the top of the gearbox, so you are going to have to drop exhaust, prop shaft and everything. And then for me this job took about 5 hours on the driveway. That was with all the GoPro filming stuff as well, so I think if you're confident you could do this on the floor in around 4 hours. Not the worst job, but certainly not the best job, and it is boiling hot today, as you might be able to see as I'm starting to sweat just talking to you guys on camera. But it's done. Big thanks to Spartan Automotive. Tom there gave me a used one just to try and see if it fixed the problem, which it has. And we'll also go through all the SMG adaptions as well. So with the E46 M3 unfortunately paralysed in third gear on the driveway, lucky I made it home. My missus had kindly lent me the trusty 240i to go and see Tom down at Spartan Automotive. Now we've been to Tom before, for those that have followed the channel. He sorted the detent springs out, as I unfortunately have had other SMG issues in the past, but he was kind enough to say, look, I've got a spare one in the workshop, if you want to have it you can do. It's from a manual conversion, and you know what, it got me out of trouble because at some stage I really do need to do all the SMG system. So that'll be new pump, it's going to be new gear position sensor, we've done the brand new detent springs, but for this time I just wasn't in a position to be stripping all the car apart and eventually going down the route of a single mass flywheel. So he kindly said, if you come pick it up you can have it, it'll get you out of trouble, I make no guarantees. And as always, it's good to see him and have a catch up and see his own E46 M3 CSL replica. This job is doable on the floor without the use of a ramp, although it is much harder because the access is incredibly restricted, especially when removing the exhaust. But to jack the E46 up, especially in my case where I've got a very low car, I need to jack the side sill, put it on to a block of wood, pull that back out, and then I can slide the jack under the front of the car and then get it high enough to get under the central jacking point. Now the central jacking point on the front looks like a black rubber puck. If you jack there, you can bring the car up to a suitable height and then put the axle stands into place to secure the front.
Moving on to the rear, you then need to jack on the central jacking point on the back, which is just in front of the diff and behind the V-brace, which I'll include an image of now so you can get a closer look, as this bolts directly or is welded directly to the rear subframe. So we're now underneath the car. You can see the exhaust manifold coming from the front there. I haven't got a great deal of room, so I do apologise for the camera angles, but essentially we need to remove the exhaust, we need to remove the shields, go back round to the back, we need to remove the brace and the brackets that are holding the exhaust on underneath. I'm not going to separate it here, looking how furry these are, they're not going to come out, so I'm going to split it at the back box. And we've had them off at the headers when we went to Spartan Automotive last time. The only issue is I can't take the full system off, I don't think, on my own, because it's going to be so heavy, so I'm going to have to do just the centre section. But hopefully the GoPro will get the angles of that now. Now looking back at the front of the car, we need to remove the exhaust sensor and undo the exhaust from the manifold, which are these 4 E-Torx bolts here. I'll try and pass the camera down, and then essentially the whole weight of the system right above us now, which you probably can't see, will be on these brackets here, which once we undo those, the exhaust will just fall off. So don't have your face anywhere near it. Maybe use a trolley jack or something to take the weight. Removing the exhaust is definitely recommended with 2 people, but as I've shown, it is doable on your own if you use a trolley jack to secure it. Now another little tip is to use a plastic tray or tub to place the rear of the exhaust in, and the reason I do this is when you drag it out from underneath the car, you won't scratch all your centre section. In order to gain access to the prop shaft and the gearbox, the final part to remove underneath is the heat shield, which is secured with a couple of 8 and 10mm bolts, and then it's slid forward out from underneath the tunnel, and you should be able to carefully lower it down, taking care not to damage it because it's easily broken. So now laying on my back, you can see the heat shield I've just slid out the way. We've got the prop shaft, the centre bearing there, those 2 bolts we're going to need to undo, and the main coupler to the gearbox. It is incredibly hot in the UK at the moment. We're having like a mini heat wave, so I'm struggling big time. But we're on the floor. It's not ideal. Camera angles aren't amazing, but we're going to undo these bolts now. You should really mark this as well, which I'll show shortly, to do with the way it's balanced. I've heard mixed things on this, that it doesn't make a difference. Some say it does, but past experience, it takes 2 seconds to put a mark on it. We can put it back exactly the same way it came from. If we look up there, which I don't think my camera, there we go, where that blue cable tie, zip tie is, that is the gear position sensor. If only BMW had put it on the bottom. But anyway, let's get this prop shaft off. I was talking to Tom yesterday at Spartan, again, incredibly helpful, just giving me some tips, and he said bang a trolley jack on the bottom of the gearbox, undo the gearbox mounts and just lower it a little bit. Don't go mad, but just to give you a little bit more clearance up on the top, so I'll probably give that a go as well. But yeah, let's get this undone. So with the car in neutral, you should now be able to rotate the prop shaft, and as you can see, it looks like Tom, I assume, has already marked it from when he took it out last time, so you know roughly where it's going to go back in again, because you're going to spin it as you undo the bolts, these three. With our prop shaft now removed, you can see the trolley jack is taking the weight of the gearbox, as I removed all the gearbox bracket just so I had a bit more room to get around the back of the nuts. This will help with torquing everything up. And as Spartan mentioned, you can not drop it a lot, but we can take it down potentially 15 mil, maybe a bit more. And there is the gear position sensor. So I'm going to cut this tie so I can get that cable out the way, because this is the old one, get the Allen keys out top and bottom, and we also need to unplug the loom. You need to be really careful of all the hydraulic lines around here as well, because they're going to be old and brittle, so you don't want to be hanging or bending anything. But hopefully the camera will pick it up, and we'll lower the gearbox a little bit and get that removed. I've decided I'm going to sacrifice an old Allen key. I mean, I don't really use these sort of ones anyway, because I use them on the drivers, but I'm going to chop where the black marker is there. That's a 4mm socket, which will slide over to there, and then that should be the perfect length to reach in there from my measurement. So hopefully this, like I say, will save me rounding it off using the uniball one at the end or anything like that. So yeah, let's get to modifying.
The bolts are incredibly long for such a small sensor that's held in by the gearbox, and they also seem to be coated in a lot of lock thread. So it's certainly not easy to get out, and you do need to be careful not to round them off, because if you do round off those 4mm Allen keys, you're going to have a big problem potentially dropping the gearbox to get it off. But once removing those two bolts, you can give the sensor a light tug and it'll unclick from the gearbox. And then, as we showed in the garage later on, what that sensor looks like on the bench. But now you can take your new sensor, refit it back in, and as you should hopefully be able to see, it sort of clicks in and aligns into place. You do the bolts up, and then it's putting everything back together in the same order it was removed.
With the prop shaft back in place, using the 3 bolts, you torque them to 74 foot-pounds, which is about 100 Newton meters, and make sure you've got your original alignment back so that you know the drive shaft is back in the position it was removed. And as you probably saw, we did plug back in the SMG sensors as well.
With the car all back together, you can now place it on a trickle charger to make sure the battery doesn't go flat during the recalibration of the SMG. Now the adaptions test is done on BMW's Impa. I'm not going to go into it on this video, but essentially you can buy it online for about £30 with the cable, and at the end of the test you want to see a green screen to confirm all has been completed with no faults.
So that's the old sensor on the bench. Should we have a look inside? We've got some clips there, see if they come apart. As it was glued together, I made a decision just to put a hacksaw through it and take it apart. Well, that's never going to be used again, but it's interesting to see inside. It just reminds me of old motor control speed controllers when I used to play with RC cars. I say used to, like I don't, but yeah, I was half expecting for the £600-700 these cost new from BMW for a couple of gold coins to roll out, but yeah, pretty basic inside. You can see, I mean, it's hard to do it with hand, but as it goes back it runs and turns, but mine is locking out in the middle, which I guess would kind of make sense. And what else I noticed was I had like heavy gouge marks, don't know whether this is going to focus, on the actuator rod. I don't think you'll be able to see it. There's like almost like score lines down it, whereas the new one didn't. But yeah, interesting to see it apart. Obviously massively disappointing. The time will come when I have to buy one from BMW, but Tom has from Spartan Automotive saved the day, and means I can drive the car for the summer.
So I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, make sure you hit that like button, consider subscribing. Until the next time, thanks for watching.